The gunshot echoed across the barren plains of Montana Territory, 1876, as Sarah Miller clutched her 6-year-old daughter Emma to her chest, their thin frames shivering despite the summer heat. 3 days without food had weakened them both, and the dilapidated cabin they'd found offered little protection from the bandits who'd been trailing them since Blackwater Creek. "Please," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible as the door splintered open. "Don't hurt us. We have nothing left to take." The silhouette in the doorway towered against the setting sun, broad-shouldered and imposing. Sarah closed her eyes, preparing for the worst, when a gentle voice cut through her fear. "Madam, I ain't here to harm you," the stranger said, holstering his revolver. "Name's Francis Hayes. Those shots were meant for the coyotes circling your place." Sarah kept Emma behind her, years of hardship having taught her caution. "How do I know you're not with them, the men who have been following us?" Francis stepped into the light, revealing a weathered face no older than 30, with kind eyes that had seen their share of trouble. "If I were, madam, I wouldn't be offering you this." He slowly reached into his saddlebag and pulled out jerky and a canteen. "Looks like you two could use some sustenance." Emma's stomach growled audibly, and Sarah's resolve crumbled. "Thank you," she managed, accepting the offerings with trembling hands. Francis knelt down to eye level with Emma, his voice softening. "What's your name, little one?" "Emma," the girl replied, peeking from behind her mother's skirts. "Are you a real cowboy?" A smile broke across his sun-bronzed face. "Sure am, got a ranch about 5 miles east of here." Sarah watched cautiously as her daughter took to the stranger, something she hadn't done since losing her father. "We should be moving on come morning," she said, though the thought of continuing their journey with no destination filled her with dread. Francis stood, glancing out the broken window at the darkening sky. "Those men tracking you, they're Whitley's gang, ain't they? They've been terrorizing these parts for months." Sarah nodded, fear evident in her eyes. "My husband Daniel owed them money. After the drought took our farm and the fever took him, they came collecting, said I'd have to pay with other means." She pulled Emma closer. "We ran that night." Determination hardened Francis's features. "You can't outrun them forever, not in your condition." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "My ranch has spare rooms, food, and security, at least until you get your bearings." "Why would you help strangers?" Sarah asked, suspicion edging her voice. "Because my ma raised me right," Francis replied simply. "And out here, folks need to look out for each other." He moved toward the door. "I'll keep watch tonight. We'll head to my place at first light if you're willing." Sarah looked down at Emma, whose eyes had already begun to close, the small bite of jerky having taken what little energy she had left. The past month had been a desperate flight across the territory, sleeping in abandoned buildings and stealing what food they could. They couldn't keep running. "We'll come," she decided, her voice stronger than before. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." "Francis, please," he corrected with a gentle smile. "Get some rest, Mrs. Miller. I'll protect you always." The words hung in the air between them, a promise that seemed too good to be true in a world that had shown Sarah nothing but cruelty since Daniel's passing. Dawn broke with a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. Francis stood above her, a finger to his lips. "We need to move now," he whispered. "Riders coming from the south." Sarah scrambled to gather their meager belongings, rousing Emma, who blinked sleep from her eyes. "Are the bad men coming, Mama?" she asked, her small voice tinged with fear. "Hush now," Sarah soothed. "Mr. Hayes is taking us somewhere safe." Outside, Francis helped them onto his horse, a sturdy chestnut mare. "Name's Penny," he told Emma as he lifted her up. "She's the fastest horse in the territory." Sarah settled behind her daughter, arms encircling Emma's waist, as Francis took the reins and led them on foot. They kept to the tree line, moving east as the sun climbed higher. Sarah noticed how Francis's eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, one hand never far from his revolver. "You've done this before," she observed quietly as Emma dozed against her chest. Francis glanced back, a shadow crossing his features. "Army scout during the war, old habits die hard." The war's been over for 11 years, Sarah noted. Some wars never truly end, Mrs. Miller, he replied, his gaze returning to the horizon. They traveled in companionable silence until midday when the landscape began to change. Rolling hills gave way to a green valley, nestled within which sat a modest but well-maintained ranch. A two-story house stood proudly among several outbuildings, and cattle grazed in fenced pastures. "It ain't much," Frances said, almost apologetically, "but it's home." "It's beautiful," Sarah breathed, memories of her own lost farm bringing unexpected tears. As they approached, a grizzled older man emerged from the barn, rifle in hand until he recognized Frances. "'Bout time you showed up. Was fixing to send out a search party. Ran into some folks needing help, Walter," Frances called back. "This is Mrs. Miller and her daughter Emma." Walter nodded respectfully, his weathered face softening at the sight of the child. "Madam, little miss. Walter Simmons, foreman of this outfit." Frances helped them dismount, Emma clinging to her mother's skirts as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Walter, get Penny settled, would you? I'm going to show our guests to the house." The main house was simple but comfortable, with solid furniture and clean floors. "My mother's touch," Frances explained as he showed them to a room upstairs. "She passed 3 years ago, but I've tried to keep things as she left them." Sarah ran her hand along a quilt draped over the bed. "It's more than kind of you to offer us shelter." "It's nothing," Frances insisted. "There's a washroom down the hall. I'll have Rosa, she helps with the cooking, bring up some hot water and food." Left alone, Sarah sank onto the bed, exhaustion overtaking her. Emma climbed up beside her, small fingers tracing the pattern on the quilt. "Is this our home now, Mama?" Sarah smoothed her daughter's tangled hair. "No, sweetheart, we're just visitors. Mr. Hayes is being kind to help us." "I like him," Emma declared. "He has nice eyes like Papa did." Sarah felt a pang at the mention of Daniel. He'd been a good man, if not always a practical one. His gambling debts had ultimately led them here, yet she couldn't bring herself to hate him for it. A knock interrupted her thoughts. A plump woman with a kind face entered, carrying a tray of food and followed by a young boy with a bucket of steaming water. "Senora, I am Rosa. Mr. Hayes said you need food, bath. I bring both." The meal was simple beans, cornbread, and fresh milk, but to Sarah and Emma, it was a feast fit for royalty. After eating, they took turns bathing, the warm water washing away weeks of dirt and fear. Rosa had left clean clothes as well, simple but well-made dresses that fit surprisingly well. "Mr. Francis's mother," Rosa explained when Sarah thanked her. "Same size as you, he say you use, no problem." Dressed and feeling human again, Sarah ventured downstairs to find Francis at the kitchen table going over ledgers. He looked up, momentarily startled by her transformed appearance. "Mrs. Miller," he said, standing quickly. "You look," he caught himself. "That is, you seem refreshed." "Sarah, please," she replied, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "And yes, it's amazing what a bath and clean clothes can do for one's spirits." Emma bounded down the stairs behind her, hair still damp and braided by Rosa's skilled hands. "Mr. Hayes, Rosa gave me a ribbon for my hair. Look," Frances knelt to admire the blue ribbon. "Well now, that's mighty pretty, Miss Emma. Blue's my favorite color." "Mine too." Emma exclaimed, delighted by the coincidence. Sarah watched the interaction with a mixture of gratitude and unease. Emma was becoming attached too quickly, and they couldn't stay here indefinitely. The danger hadn't passed, it had merely been postponed. As if reading her thoughts, Frances stood and addressed her seriously. "Those men will keep looking. Whitley's not known for giving up easily." "I know," Sarah sighed. "We'll be on our way as soon as—" "That's not what I meant," Frances interrupted gently. "I've sent Walter into town to gather information. We need to know what we're up against before deciding next steps." Sarah questioned. "This isn't your fight, Mr. Hayes," Frances, he corrected. "And out here, neighbors help neighbors. Consider yourself my neighbor for now." The next few days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Sarah helped Rosa with household chores while Emma shadowed Francis around the ranch, absorbing everything about cattle ranching with childlike enthusiasm. At night, they gathered for meals, conversation flowing more easily as their trust grew. Sarah learned that Francis had inherited the ranch from his parents and expanded it through hard work and smart investments in railroad stock. He'd never married, dedicated instead to building something that would last. "My father always said a man's legacy is what he leaves behind," Francis explained one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset while Emma played with the ranch dog. "Figured I needed to build something worth leaving first." Daniel was the same, Sarah offered, surprising herself by speaking of her late husband, always dreaming of what could be rather than seeing what was. Francis regarded her thoughtfully. "Yet you loved him for it." "I did," she admitted. "Even when his dreams led us to hardship, there was something beautiful about his hope." They sat in companionable silence until Walter rode in, his expression grim. Francis excused himself to speak with the foreman privately, but Sarah could tell from their body language that the news wasn't good. Later, after Emma was asleep, Francis found Sarah in the kitchen nursing a cup of tea. "Whitley knows you're in the area," he said without preamble. "He's offering a bounty." Sarah's cup clattered against the saucer. "How much?" "Enough to tempt men who should know better," Francis replied, pouring himself a small whiskey. "But that's not the worst of it. He's claiming legal right to Emma." "What?" Sarah gasped, horror spreading through her. "That's impossible." "He's saying Daniel signed papers making him Emma's guardian in case of debt non-payment," Francis explained, disgust evident in his tone. "It's horseshit, of course, but he's got the local magistrate in his pocket." Sarah's mind raced with panic. "We need to leave, tonight." "Head for California," or Francis's hand covered hers, warm and steadying. "Running won't solve this, Sarah. Whitley's reach is long and you'll never stop looking over your shoulder." "What choice do I have?" she whispered, tears threatening. "Let me help," Francis urged. "I've sent for a friend, a lawyer from Helena. He'll be here in 2 days. Meanwhile, I've doubled the guards on the property." Sarah looked into his earnest face, wanting desperately to believe. "Why are you doing all this? You barely know us." Francis's hand remained on hers, his gaze unwavering. "I knew from the moment I found you in that cabin that you were worth protecting. You and Emma both." Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings growing beyond mere charity or obligation. Sarah withdrew her hand reluctantly. "I should check on Emma." "Of course," Francis nodded, understanding her need for distance. "Rest well, Sarah." The lawyer, Maxwell Cooper, arrived as promised 2 days later, a sharp-dressed man with spectacles and a no-nonsense demeanor. After reviewing what little documentation Sarah possessed regarding her marriage and Emma's birth, he spent hours questioning her about Daniel's dealings with Whitley. "The claim is tenuous at best," Maxwell finally declared as they gathered in Francis's study. "But Whitley's influence complicates matters. We need more than just your word against his." Daniel kept a journal, Sarah remembered suddenly. He recorded all his debts, all his payments. It would show the true amount owed, not the inflated sum Whitley claims. "Where is this journal?" Maxwell asked, interest piqued. Sarah's face fell. "At our farm. I didn't think to grab it when we fled." Francis leaned forward. "Where exactly is your farm, Sarah?" "About 50 miles south of Blackwater Creek, little place called Cottonwood Valley." Francis exchanged glances with Walter, who had been silently observing. 2 days' ride if we push it, Walter noted. "Too dangerous," Maxwell objected. "If Whitley's men spot you, they'll be watching the farm," Francis agreed, "but they won't be expecting us to come from the north." He turned to Sarah. "If we had this journal, could you find it quickly?" Sarah nodded. "Daniel had a hiding place beneath a floorboard in our bedroom. I could find it blindfolded." The plan came together swiftly. Francis, Walter, and 2 trusted ranch hands would escort Sarah to the farm under cover of darkness. Maxwell would stay behind with Emma, protected by the remaining ranch hands. "I don't like leaving her," Sarah fretted as she prepared for the journey. Rosa will watch her like a hawk, Francis assured her. And the men know to shoot first and ask questions later if anyone approaches. The goodbye with Emma was harder than Sarah anticipated. Be good for Rosa, she instructed, kissing her daughter's forehead. Mama will be back before you know it. Promise? Emma asked, lower lip trembling. I promise, my love, and have I ever broken a promise to you? Emma shook her head solemnly. Never ever. Francis knelt beside them. Your mama's the bravest lady I know, Emma. And I'll make sure she comes back safe to you. They rode out at dusk, taking a circuitous route to avoid main roads. Sarah rode double with Francis, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait and Francis's solid presence before her provided unexpected comfort in the gathering darkness. They made camp in a secluded grove well past midnight, keeping the fire small and voices lower. As the others settled to sleep, Sarah found herself restless, venturing to the edge of their camp where Francis stood watch. You should rest, he advised quietly. Tomorrow will be a long day. I keep thinking about what we'll find, Sarah admitted. The farm, our home. It's been over a month now, Francis's expression softened in the moonlight. Property can be rebuilt, Sarah. What matters is keeping you and Emma safe. And if we can't, if the journal isn't there or it doesn't help, Francis turned fully toward her, his gaze intense. Then we'll find another way. I meant what I said that first night. I'll protect you always, Sarah, both of you. The conviction in his voice stirred something within her, hope perhaps, or something deeper. Why us, Francis? Of all the hard luck cases in the territory, why risk everything for a widow and her child? Francis was quiet for a long moment. When I was 12, my father took in a family fleeing violence back east, a woman and her son, not much older than me. They stayed with us for nearly a year before moving on to Oregon. He smiled at the memory. Pa said it was just being neighborly, but I saw how it changed them having safe harbor when they needed it most. He met her eyes directly. But if I'm honest, Sarah, it's more than that with you and Emma. From that first moment in the cabin, seeing your courage despite everything, I admired you, and these past days getting to know you both. He trailed off, seeming to search for words. You've awakened something in me I thought was long buried, he finished quietly. Sarah felt her heart quicken, torn between the growing feelings she couldn't deny and the practicality that had kept her alive this long. Francis, a twig snapped in the darkness, instantly silencing their conversation. Francis's hand went to his revolver, motioning for Sarah to get down. Walter materialized from the shadows, rifle ready. Dear, he whispered after a tense moment, nodding toward the tree line where a doe could be seen picking her way through the underbrush. False alarm. The moment between Sarah and Francis had passed, but something had changed, an acknowledgement of possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. They reached the outskirts of Cottonwood Valley by nightfall the next day. From their vantage point in the hills, Sarah could see her former home, a small farmhouse with a barn and corral, dark and seemingly abandoned. No signs of occupation, Walter observed through a spyglass. But that doesn't mean they ain't watching. Francis formulated a plan. Walter and one ranch hand would create a diversion on the far side of the property while Francis, Sarah, and the other hand, Jacob, would approach from the creek bed where tree cover was thickest. In and out in 15 minutes, Francis instructed. No heroics, no lingering. We get the journal and ride hard back north. The plan worked initially without a hitch. Walter's diversion, setting fire to an abandoned shed half a mile away, drew whatever watchers might have been present. Sarah led Francis and Jacob to the house, emotion threatening to overwhelm her as she stepped into what had once been her home. Everything had been ransacked, furniture overturned, Daniel's books scattered, Emma's few toys broken and discarded. Sarah forced herself to focus, heading directly for the bedroom while Francis kept watch. The floorboard came up easily, revealing Daniel's hiding place. The journal was there, along with a small pouch of coins and, to Sarah's surprise, a folded document with official seals. Land deed, she murmured, scanning it quickly. To property in Wyoming Territory, I had no idea. Later, Francis urged. We need to move. They were halfway back to the creek when shots rang out. Jacob fell with a cry, clutching his shoulder. Francis pushed Sarah behind a water trough, returning fire as dark figures emerged from the tree line. Whitley's men, Francis growled. Walter's diversion didn't fool them all. Sarah clutched the journal to her chest, heart pounding. Jacob, I'll get him, Francis assured her. When I give the signal, run for the creek bed. Don't stop, don't look back. I won't leave you, Sarah protested. Francis's eyes held hers for a heartbeat. Trust me. Before she could respond, he darted from cover, firing rapidly as he pulled the wounded Jacob toward them. More shots exploded around them, splintering wood and kicking up dirt. Now, Francis shouted, providing covering fire as Sarah sprinted for the creek, journal and deed clutched tightly. She heard more gunfire, a shout of pain, and then Francis was beside her, half carrying Jacob as they scrambled down the embankment. Walter and the other hand found them minutes later, all of them mounting quickly and riding hard into the night. It wasn't until they'd put several miles between themselves and the farm that Sarah noticed the blood staining Francis's shirt. You're hit, she gasped, reining closer. Just grazed, he dismissed, though his pallor suggested otherwise. Keep moving. They rode through the night, stopping only when the horses needed rest. By dawn, Jacob's wound had been cleaned and bandaged, but Francis's condition had worsened. The graze proved to be a bullet lodged in his side, and fever had set in by the time they made camp. We need to get him back to the ranch, Walter decided after examining the wound. He needs proper tending. Sarah tore strips from her petticoat for fresh bandages, her hands trembling as she helped clean the angry red flesh around the bullet hole. Francis drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling occasionally sometimes orders to the men, sometimes her name. During one lucid moment, as Sarah bathed his forehead with cool water, he caught her wrist weakly. The journal, safe, she assured him. And there was more deed to land in Wyoming. Daniel must have been planning for us to start fresh there. Francis managed a small smile. Smart man, your husband. Rest now, Sarah urged, her throat tight with emotion. We'll be home soon. His eyes, glazed with fever, searched hers. Home, he repeated softly before slipping back into unconsciousness. They reached the ranch the following evening, Francis draped over his horse, held in place by Walter. Rosa's cries of alarm brought everyone running, including Emma, who broke away from Maxwell to race toward her mother. Mama. You came back, she cried, throwing herself into Sarah's arms. I promised, didn't I? Sarah managed, holding her daughter close while watching Francis being carried into the house. The next hours passed in a blur. The local doctor was summoned, the bullet removed, and Francis placed under Rosa's vigilant care. Sarah divided her time between reassuring Emma and checking on Francis's condition, which remained precarious. The fever's the danger now, Dr. Holbrook explained. If it breaks within 2 days, he should recover fully. Those 2 days were the longest of Sarah's life. She read Daniel's journal thoroughly, confirming what she'd suspected. Whitley had fraudulently inflated the debt and forged documents. The Wyoming deed proved even more valuable. Daniel had purchased the land outright, giving them legitimate claim to property far from Whitley's reach. Maxwell was cautiously optimistic. With the journal as evidence and witnesses to Whitley's threats, we have a solid case. The territorial judge arriving next month is known for his fairness. We can petition him directly. But none of it mattered if Francis didn't recover. Sarah found herself sitting beside his bed late into the night, sometimes reading aloud from books found in his study, sometimes simply holding his hand and willing him to fight. On the second night, as she dozed in the chair beside him, Francis's voice, weak but clear, startled her awake. You're still here, he observed, his eyes clear for the first time in days. Sarah leaned forward, relief washing over her. Of course I am. How do you feel? Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo, he grimaced, attempting to shift position. But alive thanks to you and Walter. Thanks to your stubbornness, more like, Sarah corrected, helping him take a sip of water. The doctor says your fever's broken. You should recover fully with rest. Frances studied her face in the lamplight. The journal, did Maxwell think it would help? Sarah nodded, bringing him up to date on all that had happened. When she mentioned the Wyoming deed, Frances's expression brightened. That's wonderful news, Sarah. A fresh start, just as you deserve. Something in his tone made her heart sink. You think we should go? Frances looked away. It would be safer for you and Emma. Whitley can't reach you there. Is that what you want? Sarah asked quietly. His eyes met hers again, emotion plain in their depths. What I want is your happiness and safety. Both of you have become important to me. Sarah took his hand, her decision crystallizing in that moment. What about your happiness, Frances? These past weeks, despite everything, I've found something I thought was lost forever after Daniel died. Emma has bloomed here, and you. She paused, gathering courage. You've shown me that my heart isn't as finished as I believed. Hope dawned in Frances's expression. Sarah, are you saying I'm saying that Wyoming can wait? She finished. If you'll have us, I'd like to stay, to see if what's growing between us might flourish. Frances's hand tightened around hers. I'd like nothing more. The next month brought dramatic changes. With Maxwell's legal expertise, Sarah presented her case to the territorial judge, who issued a warrant for Whitley's arrest on charges of fraud, extortion, and attempted kidnapping. Whitley fled the territory rather than face justice, his power base crumbling as others came forward with similar accusations. Sarah and Emma remained at the Hayes Ranch, their presence transforming the house into a true home. Frances recovered fully, though he carried a new scar as reminder of their ordeal. His relationship with Sarah deepened daily, built on mutual respect and growing affection. Emma took to ranch life with enthusiasm, collecting eggs each morning and helping Frances name the new calves. She called him Papa Francis, now a title that had first emerged spontaneously, and now felt entirely natural. On a crisp autumn evening, 6 months after that desperate night in the abandoned cabin, Frances asked Sarah to walk with him to the ridge overlooking the valley. The sunset painted the landscape in gold and crimson as he turned to her, taking both her hands in his. I never thought to find love again, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. After my parents passed, I poured everything into this land, believing it would be enough. But then you and Emma came into my life and everything changed. Sarah felt tears gathering, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. We arrived with nothing, Frances. You gave us everything. No, he corrected gently. You gave me far more purpose beyond mere survival, joy in simple moments, a family to cherish. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold band. Sarah Miller, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Of making our family official in the eyes of God and man? Sarah's answer was in her kiss, tender yet passionate, filled with promise. When they finally parted, both breathless, she whispered, Yes, Frances Hayes, 1,000 times yes. They married 2 weeks later in the small church in town, Emma serving as flower girl and Walter standing as best man. The entire community turned out to celebrate, the story of their meeting having become something of a local legend. That night, after Emma had been tucked in, Frances carried Sarah across the threshold of their home, no longer his alone, but truly theirs. As he set her down in their bedroom, now warmed by a crackling fire, he cupped her face tenderly. You remember what I said that first night? He asked softly. When you asked why I was helping you, Sarah nodded, leaning into his touch. You said you'd protect us always. And I meant it, Frances affirmed, drawing her close. But now I understand it wasn't just about protection. It was about love, a love that began the moment I saw you, brave and fierce despite everything. It seems impossible, Sarah marveled, her arms encircling his neck. That from such desperation could come such joy. Not impossible, Frances corrected, his lips finding hers. Just the most important journey of our lives. As autumn gave way to winter, the Hayes Ranch flourished under their combined care. The Wyoming property remained in Sarah's name, a legacy for Emma and any future children that might bless their union. Whitley's name faded from local memory, replaced by stories of the cowboy who found a starving widow and her child and gave them not just protection, but a home filled with love. And on cold nights, when the wind howled across the Montana plains, Sarah would often think back to that desperate moment in the cabin, when a stranger's voice had cut through her fear with a promise that seemed too good to be true. She never could have imagined then how completely that promise would be fulfilled, not just in safety and security, but in a love that had healed wounds she thought would never mend. In Francis's arms, with Emma sleeping peacefully down the hall, Sarah had found not just protection, but a new beginning, proof that even in the harshest wilderness, love could take root and flourish against all odds.